Can a silent hermit, secluded in the Lebanese mountains, become one of the most revered saints of our time? Saint Charbel Makhlouf, the humble Maronite monk whose life unfolded in austerity and prayer, has become a beacon of hope for millions of faithful around the world. Through countless miracles, both during his life and after his death, God has chosen to manifest the holiness of this faithful servant, whose intercession continues to shower blessings upon those who invoke his name with faith and devotion. Chapter 1. The early years of Yusuf. In the small village of Bekar Kafra, nestled high in the majestic Lebanese mountains, over 1,500 meters above sea level, a child was born on May 8, 1828. He would be named Yusuf Antoun Makhlouf. He was the fifth child of Antoun Zarour Makhlouf and Brigitta Chidiac, humble but deeply Christian peasants belonging to the Maronite Church. One of the oldest Catholic communities in the East, life in that mountainous region was hard and demanding. Families subsisted mainly by cultivating small plots of land and herding goats and sheep. Despite material difficulties, the Makhlouf family lived with the dignity that comes from unwavering faith. Stories of the saints, daily prayers, and participation in the divine liturgy were essential parts of their lives. When Yusuf was only 3 years old, his father died while serving in the Ottoman army, leaving Brigitta with the difficult task of raising her children alone. This circumstance, far from weakening the family's faith, strengthened it even more. The widow, a woman of exceptional piety, instilled in her children an ardent devotion and a deep love for God and the Blessed Virgin Mary, whom they invoked especially under the title of Our Lady of Lebanon. From a very young age, Yusuf showed a special inclination towards solitude and prayer. While other children played, he sought moments to withdraw and contemplate nature, seeing in it a reflection of divine grandeur. His countrymen remember that he used to climb a nearby hill overlooking a vast panorama of the surrounding valleys and mountains, and would remain there for a long time, absorbed in prayer. Yusuf's formal education was limited, as was common in that time and place. However, he learned the fundamental truths of the Christian faith and became familiar with the Holy Scriptures and the lives of the saints, especially the Desert Fathers, whose examples of austerity and contemplation would have a profound influence on his future spirituality. His maternal uncle, a hermit monk, also served as an inspiring role model for the young man, sowing in his heart the seed of a monastic vocation that would later flourish. Chapter 2. The Divine Call. Yusuf Makhlouf's adolescence was marked by a progressive awakening of his religious vocation. While helping his family with agricultural work and herding, his heart experienced a growing attraction to consecrated life. The hours he spent in solitude, leading the flock through the hills of Lebanon, became extended moments of prayer and meditation, during which he felt increasingly clearly the voice of God, inviting him to total surrender. At 23, the divine call became irresistible. Against the wishes of his family, who had arranged an advantageous marriage for him with a young woman from the village, Yusuf decided to leave his home to follow the path of religious consecration. One night in 1851, without saying goodbye to his loved ones to avoid painful farewells and possible opposition, he secretly left for the monastery of Our Lady of Mayfouk, located a considerable distance from his native village. The decision was not taken lightly or out of youthful rebellion. Yusuf had long pondered this step, aware of the pain it would cause his mother and siblings, especially because in the Lebanese culture of the time, the son represented fundamental support for the family's subsistence. However, he had come to the profound conviction that God was calling him to a life of total consecration and that he must respond generously to this divine invitation. In the monastery of Mayfouk, Yusuf was welcomed by the monks of the Lebanese Maronite order, who were impressed by the seriousness and determination of the young aspirant. After a brief probationary period, he was sent to the novitiate of the monastery of St. Maron in Anaya, where he would formally begin his journey towards religious life. Upon entering the novitiate, following monastic tradition, Yusuf changed his name to Charbel, in honor of an ancient Christian martyr of the 2nd century. This change of name symbolized a profound inner transformation. The old man died, with his earthly ties and worldly aspirations to give way to a new creature, totally consecrated to God. In this ritual gesture, the radicality with which the young novice would embrace his vocation was already manifested. The novitiate period was for Charbel a time of intense spiritual, intellectual, and human formation. He immersed himself in the study of theology and philosophy, but above all, he imbibed the Maronite monastic spirit, characterized by a profound life of prayer, penance, and manual labor. His superiors and companions soon realized that he was no ordinary novice. His fervor, his recollection, and his scrupulous fidelity to the monastic rule revealed a privileged soul, specially touched by divine grace. Chapter 3. Monastic Life. On November 1st, 1853, after 2 years of novitiate, Brother Charbel pronounced his religious vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience at the monastery of St. Maron. The ceremony, simple but solemn according to Maronite tradition, marked his definitive incorporation into the Lebanese Maronite order. Those who witnessed this event would later recall the expression of peace and joy that illuminated the young monk's face as he consecrated himself forever to the service of God. Immediately after his religious profession, Brother Charbel was sent to the monastery of Kfifan, a center for theological studies of the order, to complete his priestly formation. There, under the guidance of holy and wise teachers like Saint Nimatullah Kasab al-Hardini, he delved deeper into the knowledge of the Holy Scriptures, patristic writings, dogmatic and moral theology, as well as the rich Maronite liturgical tradition. During his years of study in Kfifan, Brother Charbel distinguished himself not so much for his intellectual gifts, which, while not exceptional, were certainly noteworthy, but for his extraordinary piety and unwavering fidelity to the monastic discipline. While other students used recreation periods for conversations or walks, he preferred to retreat to the chapel to prolong his prayer or dedicate himself to humble tasks. His conduct wasn't the result of unsociableness or disdain for his brothers, but of a constant yearning for communion with God. On July 23, 1859, Brother Charbel was ordained a priest by the laying on of hands of the Maronite Bishop of Tripoli. The priestly ordination, which for many religious represents the culmination of their aspirations, was for him simply another step on his path of total surrender to God. With the same humility and simplicity that characterized all his actions, he began to exercise his priestly ministry, celebrating the divine liturgy with extraordinary devotion and administering the sacraments with profound reverence. After his priestly ordination, Father Charbel returned to the monastery of St. Maron in Anaya, where he would remain for the next 16 years, living a life of extraordinary austerity and fidelity to the rule. His day, like that of all the monks, was structured according to the ancient Benedictine principle of ora et labora, pray and work. However, even within this already austere life, Father Charbel stood out for his special rigor. He slept few hours, ate frugally, worked tirelessly at the humblest tasks, and dedicated long hours to prayer, often extending late into the night. Chapter 4. The Hermit of Anaya. In 1875, after 16 years of cenobitic life at the monastery of St. Maron, Father Charbel requested permission from his superiors to retire to the hermitage of Saints Peter and Paul, located a few kilometers from the main monastery. This request wasn't the result of a momentary whim or a desire for greater freedom, but the culmination of a long inner process, a response to an increasingly clear divine calling towards a life of greater solitude and prayer. The order's superiors, aware of Father Charbel's exceptional virtue and the authenticity of his eremitic vocation, granted his request, not without first subjecting him to various tests to confirm the solidity of his purpose. One night, according to monastic chronicles, the superior ordered him to sleep on the snow covering the monastery courtyard. Father Charbel obeyed without the slightest objection, spending the entire night outdoors. The next morning, when the superior went to check on his condition, he found him still in the same place, with the snow melted around him, forming a perfect circle. This prodigy, interpreted as a divine sign, dispelled the last doubts about the authenticity of his eremitic vocation. The hermitage of Saints Peter and Paul, where Father Charbel would spend the last 23 years of his life, was a rudimentary stone structure consisting of two small rooms. One served as a chapel for the celebration of the divine liturgy, and the other as a cell for the hermit. Living conditions were extremely harsh, without electricity or heating, exposed to the rigors of the mountainous climate, with frequent snowfalls in winter and scorching heat in summer. In this austere retreat, Father Charbel established an even more rigorous regime of life than he had followed in the monastery. His day began at 3 in the morning with prolonged hours of prayer, followed by the celebration of the divine liturgy. The rest of the day he dedicated to spiritual reading, meditation, manual labor in a small garden near the hermitage, and the making of instruments for worship or utensils for monastic use. His diet was extremely frugal, consisting mainly of one daily meal brought to him by a monk from the nearby monastery, usually a little boiled vegetables, legumes, and occasionally bread. He drank only water from a nearby spring and frequently fasted, especially during the liturgical seasons of Advent and Lent. His clothing consisted of a rough monastic habit that he wore until it fell apart from use, without concessions to the winter cold or the summer heat. Chapter 5. A Life of Penitence and Prayer. Father Charbel's daily existence in the hermitage of Saints Peter and Paul was imbued with a spirit of continuous penitence and prayer. His asceticism wasn't the result of a disdain for the body or a negative view of material creation, but an expression of an ardent love for God that impelled him to free himself from everything that could hinder his union with him. Each privation, each mortification was offered as an act of love and reparation for the sins of the world. The center of his spiritual life was the Blessed Sacrament. The daily celebration of the divine liturgy was for him not a mere priestly duty, but the high point of his day, the actualization of the sacrifice of Christ in which he participated with his whole being. The monks who occasionally assisted him during the celebration were impressed by his extraordinary recollection, his transfigured face, and at times the tears that streamed down his cheeks during the consecration of the bread and wine. After Mass, Father Charbel usually remained for a long time in thanksgiving, kneeling immobile before the Blessed Sacrament. This adoration lasted for several moments of the day and a good part of the night. According to the testimony of his contemporaries, on more than one occasion he was found in ecstasy, raised from the ground, his face radiant as if illuminated by an inner light. Devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary also occupied a privileged place in his spirituality. The daily recitation of the Holy Rosary, the meditation of the mysteries of Christ's life through Mary's eyes, the filial trust in her maternal intercession were constant practices in his life. In the small chapel of the hermitage, next to the crucifix, there was a simple image of Our Lady of Lebanon, before which the holy hermit frequently prostrated himself, imploring her protection. Father Charbel's penitential discipline also included severe bodily mortifications. In addition to rigorous fasts, it is known that he used silice and disciplines to subdue his flesh, although always with due discretion and under the supervision of his superiors. These practices, incomprehensible to the contemporary mentality, were common in the Eastern ascetic tradition and responded to a profound understanding of the redemptive value of suffering united to that of Christ. Despite his physical isolation, Father Charbel's heart remained open to the world's needs. His intercessory prayers encompassed the intentions of the universal church, the needs of his order, the sufferings of his Lebanese compatriots who were then enduring hard times under Ottoman rule, and the particular requests of those who, knowing his holiness, came to the hermitage seeking spiritual solace. Without leaving his retreat, he exercised a fruitful apostolate through prayer and sacrifice. Chapter 6. The Thaumaturgic Power. As the years passed in the silence of the hermitage, Father Charbel's reputation for holiness grew. Despite his seclusion and his desire to remain hidden from the world's eyes, God began to manifest the sanctity of his servant through various supernatural phenomena and miracles. These quickly drew the attention of the simple folk of the surrounding areas. The first of these prodigies, widely documented in the beatification processes, was the so-called miracle of the lamp. In the small chapel of the hermitage, an oil lamp burned constantly before the Blessed Sacrament. On one occasion, the monk responsible for supplying the hermitage forgot to bring the necessary oil to keep it lit. Father Charbel, noticing the situation, filled the lamp with water, and after blessing it and making the sign of the cross over it, he lit it. To everyone's astonishment, the lamp continued to burn with water instead of oil for several days, until the usual supply was replenished. Another prodigy frequently attested to by contemporary witnesses was the mysterious light that during the nights could be seen shining over the hermitage. Numerous peasants and shepherds from the surrounding areas claimed to have seen on numerous occasions a strange radiance illuminating the humble building, a phenomenon they interpreted as a manifestation of the divine fire that burned in the soul of the holy hermit. Father Charbel's reputation for intercessory power began to attract people in need of spiritual or material help. Although he never left the hermitage to attend to these visitors, on special occasions and always with the explicit permission of his superiors, he agreed to receive those who came seeking comfort or healing. Many sick people, after receiving his blessing or drinking the water he had blessed, experienced healings inexplicable to the medical science of the time. Particularly noteworthy was the case of a young peasant from the nearby village of Emej, who suffered from a severe mental illness that led to violent and self-destructive behavior. After all medical remedies proved ineffective, his desperate parents took him to Father Charbel. The holy hermit, moved by the family's suffering, prayed intensely over the young man, anointed his forehead with holy oil, and laid his hands on him. From that moment on, the sick man completely recovered his mental health, able to return to a normal life. These and many other prodigies were neither sought nor flaunted by Father Charbel, who, faithful to his spirit of humility, always sought to attribute the healings to the intercession of the saints or to the faith of the sick themselves, never to his personal merits. When someone tried to thank him or praise him for a favor received, he usually responded with a phrase that summed up his deep humility. "Glory belongs to God alone. I am nothing but a poor, useless servant." Chapter 7. The Passage to Heaven. On December 16, 1898, while celebrating the Divine Liturgy in the small chapel of the Hermitage, Father Charbel suffered a stroke at the moment of consecration. Despite the intense pain that gripped him, the holy hermit, with a supreme effort of will, managed to continue the celebration until communion. Immediately afterward, he collapsed before the altar, still holding the chalice in his trembling hands. The monks of the nearby monastery of St. Maron, alerted by the assistant who usually helped Father Charbel at Mass, quickly went to the hermitage. They found the elderly priest semi-conscious, his face transfigured by pain, but at the same time illuminated by an expression of supernatural peace. They took him to a cell in the monastery where, for 8 days, he remained between life and death, alternating periods of lucidity with moments of unconsciousness. During these last days of his earthly life, Father Charbel showed admirable patience and surrender to the divine will. He did not complain of the pains, nor did he ask for relief from his sufferings. When he regained consciousness, his lips moved in constant prayer, especially invoking the names of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. To those who approached his bedside to express their affection or ask him for a last blessing, he offered words of comfort and urged them to persevere in faith and fidelity to their Christian vocation. On the night of December 24, 1898, Christmas Eve, his condition worsened considerably. The monks, sensing the imminence of his departure, gathered around his bed to accompany him in his last moments and to pray the prayers of the dying according to the Maronite rite. Father Charbel, gathering his last strength, asked that a crucifix be brought to him, which he kissed devoutly and uttered his last words, "Lord Jesus, into your hands I commend my spirit." At midnight, as the monastery bells announced the beginning of the Christmas Eve Mass, the soul of the holy hermit left his body to join definitively the one to whom he had consecrated his entire existence. Those present claimed to have perceived at that moment a sweet perfume that filled the room, and some declared to have seen a radiant light briefly envelop the body of the deceased. Immediately after his death, extraordinary phenomena began to manifest. Father Charbel's body, instead of showing the usual rigor mortis, remained flexible and with a normal body temperature, as if he were asleep. His face retained an expression of serenity and peace, and it even seemed to emanate a faint luminosity that deeply impressed everyone who came to watch over him. News of the holy hermit's death spread quickly through the villages of the region. Despite the snow covering the roads and the difficulties of the mountainous terrain, numerous faithful came to the monastery to pay a last tribute to the one they already considered a saint. During the 3 days of the wake, an incessant crowd filed past his mortal remains, many of them touching his body with handkerchiefs or other objects that they then kept as relics. Chapter 8. The Miracle of the Photograph. Among the numerous wonders that followed the death of Saint Charbel, one of the most extraordinary and best documented is known as the Miracle of the Photograph. This occurred in May of 1950, more than 50 years after his passing. This incredible event, which significantly contributed to the spread of his devotion beyond Lebanon, stands as a powerful testament to the holiness and intercessory power of the humble hermit of Anaya. It all began when a group of Maronite monks gathered at the monastery of St. Maron to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Lebanese Maronite order. Among the planned activities, it was decided to take a group photograph. All the monks would be pictured alongside the superior of the order in front of the monastery's main entrance. A professional photographer from the nearby city of Byblos was hired to take the pictures. The photo session proceeded normally. The photographer took several snapshots of the group from different angles, and after completing his work, he said goodbye, promising to send the developed copies in the following days. No one present observed anything unusual during the session, nor were there any noteworthy incidents. Days later, when the photographer was developing the negatives in his studio, he was astounded to find that one of the images clearly showed the figure of an elderly monk with a white beard and a serene expression. This monk had not been present during the photo session. The figure stood slightly apart from the main group, dressed in the traditional habit of the Maronite monks. Bewildered by this inexplicable event, the photographer immediately went to the monastery to show the photograph to the superior and ask him who the mysterious monk in the image was. As soon as the religious saw the photograph, they recognized without a doubt the figure of Saint Charbel. His physical appearance was well known to them, through descriptions from the oldest monks who had known him in life. and from a charcoal portrait made shortly after his death. The community was overwhelmed with amazement. They meticulously examined the photographic negative, verifying that it showed no signs of manipulation. Furthermore, the photographer, a professional of recognized honesty, solemnly swore that he had not retouched the image and had no explanation for the appearance of that figure. To rule out any possibility of fraud, several photography experts were consulted. They confirmed the authenticity of the image and the impossibility of explaining the appearance through natural causes. News of the miracle spread rapidly, first in Lebanon and then internationally. The Lebanese press published the famous photograph, along with testimonies from the monks and the photographer. Soon, the image began to be reproduced on prints and medals distributed among the faithful, greatly contributing to the spread of devotion to Saint Charbel. The impact of this miracle was particularly significant because it occurred at a crucial moment in the canonization process of the Holy Hermit. The supernatural appearance in the photograph was interpreted as a divine sign, confirming Charbel's sanctity and encouraging the Church to proceed with his beatification, which would take place shortly thereafter in 1965 under the pontificate of Pope Paul VI. Chapter 9. The Incorruption of the Body. One of the most extraordinary signs of Father Charbel's sanctity was the incorruption of his body, a phenomenon that the Catholic Church has observed in numerous saints throughout its history, and which it considers a special manifestation of divine grace. In the case of Saint Charbel, this miracle took on particularly remarkable characteristics, decisively contributing to his recognition as a saint following monastic custom. Father Charbel's body was buried without embalming in the common cemetery of the monastery of Saint Maron, in a grave dug directly into the earth and without a coffin. The humid climate of the Lebanese mountains and the absence of any preservative treatment suggested a rapid decomposition of the mortal remains. However, subsequent events would demonstrate that the laws of nature had been suspended in favor of the one who had lived so supernaturally. A few months after the burial, the monks and the inhabitants of the nearby villages began to observe a strange phenomenon. At night, a mysterious light shone over Father Charbel's grave. This miracle, attested to by numerous credible witnesses, continued to manifest itself regularly for months, attracting numerous pilgrims who came to pray at the Saint Hermit's burial place. In 1899, approximately 4 months after his death, the superiors of the order, impressed by the numerous supernatural phenomena occurring around the tomb, decided to exhume the body to move it to a more worthy sepulchre within the monastic church. Upon opening the tomb, those present were astonished. Despite the damp earth and the habit being partially deteriorated by the humidity, Father Charbel's body was perfectly preserved, showing no signs of decomposition, flexible and with intact skin, as if he had just died. Even more surprising was the discovery that a serous fluid, a mixture of blood and water, emanated from the body. It emitted a pleasant fragrance. This liquid soaked the shroud and seeped out in such quantity that it was necessary to change the saint's garments several times. The doctors who examined the body could offer no scientific explanation for this phenomenon, unknown in forensic medicine and contrary to all natural processes of cadaveric decomposition. The incorrupt body was placed in a wooden casket and deposited in a special room of the monastery, where the faithful could come to venerate it. The liquid that continued to flow from the body began to be collected by the monks and distributed among the devotees, who soon began to attribute curative properties to it. The accounts of healings and favors attributed to the intercession of Saint Charbel through the application of this liquid multiplied rapidly. In 1927, 29 years after the death of the Holy Hermit, a new exhumation was carried out to transfer his remains to a more suitable sarcophagus. Again, the body was found intact, still exuding the mysterious liquid. This extraordinary event was meticulously documented by an ecclesiastical commission, specifically appointed for the occasion. This commission included doctors and notaries who officially certified the state of incorruption. In the following years, several inspections of the body were carried out, always with similar results. The last official exhumation took place in 1950, at which point a gradual drying of the tissues began to be observed, although without any signs of putrefaction. In 1965, on the occasion of his beatification, the remains were placed in a glass and metal urn, allowing the faithful to contemplate the saint's body, still recognizable despite the natural process of mummification it had finally undergone. The phenomenon of the incorruption of Saint Charbel's body, along with the exudation of the liquid for over 50 years, constitutes one of the most extraordinary and best documented cases of supernatural preservation in the history of the Church. For believers, it represents a divine sign, confirming the holiness of this humble Lebanese monk and hermit, whose body, an instrument of penance and prayer during his earthly life, has been preserved by God as an enduring testament to his heavenly glory. Chapter 10. Beatification and Canonization. The path toward the official recognition of Father Charbel's sanctity by the Catholic Church was relatively swift compared to other similar processes, thanks to the abundance and compelling nature of the testimonies regarding his virtuous life and the numerous miracles attributed to his intercession. However, as is customary in such cases, the process followed all the stages established by canon law, with the rigor and meticulousness that characterize beatification and canonization procedures. The diocesan process began in 1926, under the direction of Maronite Patriarch Elias Hoyek. During this preliminary phase, an ecclesiastical commission gathered testimonies from people who had known Father Charbel or who had witnessed prodigies attributed to his intercession. Documents relating to his life were compiled. His sparse personal writings were examined, and the extraordinary phenomena related to his incorrupt body were meticulously investigated. In 1927, upon the conclusion of this diocesan phase, all the documentation was sent to Rome, to the then called Sacred Congregation of Rites, now the Congregation for the Causes of Saints, where the apostolic process began. Roman theologians and consultants carefully studied the material received, on several occasions requesting additional information and clarifications on certain particular aspects of the case. A crucial moment in this process was the approval, in 1954, of the decree on the heroic virtue of Father Charbel, which conferred upon him the title of Venerable. This decision, made during the pontificate of Pope Pius V, represented the official recognition that the Lebanese hermit had practiced Christian virtues to a heroic degree during his earthly life. To proceed with the beatification, it was also necessary to recognize a miracle attributed to his intercession, and that occurred after his death. Among the numerous cases presented, the Congregation for the Causes of Saints selected the inexplicable healing of Sister Mary Abel Kamari, a Lebanese nun who suffered from a serious gastric ulcer with intestinal complications. After doctors declared her case incurable and gave her only a few weeks to live, the sister was completely healed after fervently praying to Saint Charbel and applying a piece of cloth impregnated with the liquid emanating from his body to her stomach. Doctors consulted by the congregation confirmed the impossibility of explaining this healing by natural causes. On December 5, 1965, during the Second Vatican Council, Pope Paul VI proceeded with the solemn beatification of Father Charbel in St. Peter's Basilica. The ceremony, attended by numerous prelates and Lebanese faithful, constituted a moment of great joy for the Maronite Church and for all of Lebanon, which saw the universal recognition of the sanctity of one of its sons. In his homily, Pope Paul VI highlighted the ecumenical significance of this beatification, noting that the new blessed was a bridge between East and West, and a shining example of the spiritual riches possessed by the Eastern churches in communion with Rome. The pontiff also emphasized the timeliness of Father Charbel's witness in an increasingly materialistic and secularized world. After the beatification, miracles attributed to the intercession of the new blessed multiplied, not only in Lebanon, but in numerous countries around the world, among them the Congregation for the Causes of Saints selected for the canonization process the healing of Nohad el-Chami, a Lebanese woman suffering from severe hemiplegia. On the night of January 22, 1993, the sick woman had a vision in which two Maronite monks appeared, operating on her. Upon waking the next morning, she found herself completely healed. She immediately recognized one of the monks in her vision as Saint Charbel, whose image she had seen on numerous occasions. The case underwent rigorous medical and theological examination. Numerous specialists certified the impossibility of explaining the healing by natural causes, given that the neurological lesion she suffered was irreversible. According to current medical knowledge, on October 9, 1977, Pope Paul VI solemnly proclaimed the canonization of Blessed Charbel Makhlouf, enrolling him in the catalogue of saints of the Universal Church. The canonization ceremony, held in St. Peter's Square before a multitude of faithful from all over the world, especially from Lebanon and countries with significant Lebanese emigrant communities, constituted an event of great ecclesiastical significance. The Pope highlighted in his homily the significance of the new saint as a model of contemplative and ascetic life, as well as his role as a powerful intercessor before the throne of God. With this canonization, Saint Charbel became the first saint of the Maronite Church officially, recognized by the Universal Church in modern times, opening the path for the later recognition of other saints from this ancient Eastern tradition, such as Saint Nimatullah Kassab and Saint Rafka. Chapter 11. Saint Charbel in the modern world. In the decades since his canonization, devotion to Saint Charbel has not only remained vibrant, but has experienced surprising growth, extending far beyond the borders of Lebanon and Lebanese diaspora communities. Today, the humble hermit of Anaya is venerated on 5 continents, and his sanctuary at the monastery of Saint Maron has become one of the most important pilgrimage centers in the Middle East. This phenomenon is especially striking if we consider that Saint Charbel, unlike other popular saints, led an extremely secluded life. He never undertook public apostolic activities, nor did he found religious institutions, nor did he leave writings that could spread his spirituality. His message reached the world not through words or visible actions, but through the silent testimony of a life entirely consecrated to God, and through the countless miracles wrought through his intercession after his death. Every year, hundreds of thousands of pilgrims flock to the monastery of St. Maron in Anaya to venerate the saint's remains and visit the hermitage where he spent the last 23 years of his life. Among these pilgrims are not only Maronite Catholics or those of other Eastern rites, but also Christians of other denominations, Muslims, and people without a defined religious affiliation, all drawn by the saint's thaumaturgic fame. The sanctuary meticulously keeps a record of testimonies of graces and healings attributed to Saint Charbel's intercession. Since 1950, these testimonies number in the thousands and come from people of all social conditions, nationalities, and religious beliefs, although most of these cases have not undergone the rigorous verification process required by the Church for the official recognition of miracles, they constitute an impressive testimonial corpus on the saint's intercessory power. Particularly significant is the fact that many of these testimonies come from non-Christians, especially Muslims, who have come to the sanctuary as a last resort in the face of illnesses considered incurable by conventional medicine. This phenomenon has made Saint Charbel a symbol of interreligious coexistence in Lebanon, a country historically marked by confessional tensions. The saintly hermit, who in life sought only union with God in solitude, has become after his death a bridge of dialogue and encounter between different religious traditions. Devotion to Saint Charbel has also found resonance in the Western world, especially since the 1990s, when testimonies of healings and other favors attributed to his intercession began to spread widely. In numerous countries of Europe and America, sanctuaries, chapels, or altars dedicated to the Lebanese saint have been established, and prayer groups and associations have been formed to promote his knowledge and veneration. In recent times, the figure of Saint Charbel has acquired renewed relevance as a special intercessor for persecuted Christians in the Middle East. In a regional context marked by armed conflicts, political instability, and growing religious intolerance, many faithful see in the saintly hermit a heavenly protector for threatened Christian communities, especially in Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon itself. The Catholic Church has officially recognized the universality of devotion to Saint Charbel by including his feast day in the general Roman calendar, which is celebrated on July 24th. Furthermore, in the year 2000, on the occasion of the Great Jubilee, Pope St. John Paul II explicitly mentioned him as one of the great contemplative saints of the Second Christian Millennium, highlighting his role as a witness to the mystical and ascetic dimension of Christian life. The extraordinary popularity of Saint Charbel in the contemporary world can be interpreted as a providential response to the spiritual needs of our time. In a society marked by materialism, consumerism, and the frantic pursuit of pleasures and distractions, the austere and silent figure of the Lebanese hermit reminds us of the primacy of spiritual life and the enduring validity of values such as silence, prayer, austerity, and unconditional surrender to God. On the other hand, in a world fragmented by ethnic, political, and religious divisions, Saint Charbel emerges as a figure of reconciliation and unity, venerated by people of different faiths and cultures. His intercession, which knows no confessional or geographical boundaries, manifests the universality of divine love and the fundamental brotherhood of all human beings, created in the image and likeness of the same God. Chapter 12. Prayer to Saint Charbel. O glorious Saint Charbel, eminent flower of holiness who blossomed in the mountains of Lebanon, you who abandoned the world and its vanities to live in solitude and give yourself completely to God in prayer, penance, and contemplation, look upon me with compassion from your heavenly dwelling. You, who were a faithful imitator of Christ crucified, bearing on your body the marks of mortification, teach me to value eternal goods above the ephemeral pleasures of this world. Grant me a pure and detached heart, capable of recognizing God's presence in silence and in the ordinary circumstances of my life. O powerful intercessor, to whom the Lord has granted the gift of working wonders in favor of those who confidently come to your protection, hear my humble plea. You, who during your earthly life were always sensitive to the suffering of others, do not disregard my request. Mention the grace you wish to obtain, but above all, Saint Charbel, obtain for me the grace of a firm and unshakable faith, like the one you manifested throughout your entire existence. May my life, like yours, be a constant testimony of love for God and service to my brothers and sisters. May I persevere on the path of virtue until the last day of my life, to deserve to join you in the eternal contemplation of the Blessed Trinity. Saint Charbel, Hermit of Anaya, pray for us that we may be worthy of the promises of our Lord Jesus Christ. May the divine light that shone in your humble hermitage also illuminate our hearts and our lives, guiding us along paths of holiness to the heavenly homeland. Amen.